The single kerosene lamp on the dresser had burned almost to the bottom, and I remember watching the flame shrink because I could not bring myself to look at the man across the room. My wedding dress was already folded over the back of a chair. Downstairs, the last of the buggies were rolling out of the lane, the wheels crunching the frost, and somewhere a horse snorted into the cold. And my husband of one day, stood by the window with his back to me and said the words very quietly. He said he was going to ask the bishop to end it, our marriage, that first night, before it had even begun. And I, 18 years old in that lamplight, said one word. I said no. Before I tell you what happened over the next 11 Sundays, let me introduce myself. My name is Anna. I am 81 years old. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio, and this is Hannah the Amish girl, the channel where the things we were never permitted to say out loud are finally spoken. I am old now. My hands shake when I pour the coffee, but my memory of that night has not aged a single day. If you believe the truth about Amish, life should come from someone who actually lived inside it for 60 years. Please subscribe and tap that like button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever said no to something the whole world expected you to accept? I read every single one. Now let me explain what you just heard, because I know it sounds impossible. A husband asking to end a marriage on the wedding night. In the world I came from, that was not simply unusual. It was very nearly unspeakable. Let me give you the shape of things as they were when I was young, because it is different from what you may have heard about young people courting today. I was not a girl rushed to the altar at 17. I married late by the standards of my district. I was 18, yes, but in our community, a woman who was not promised by 20 was already being prayed over. My mother had 3 daughters married before me. I was the one who waited. And the man I married, his name was Jonas. He was 26, which by our reckoning made him a man who should have settled long before. Here is what people outside the community do not understand. An Amish marriage in those years was not arranged the way strangers imagine, with fathers shaking hands over a fence. But it was not free either. The Ordnung, our unwritten and unbending code, shaped every step. You courted quietly. You were published in church 2 weeks before the wedding. 300 people came. And once the bishop spoke the vows over you, there was no road back. None. Divorce did not exist. It was not forbidden the way a sin is forbidden. It simply did not exist the way a fourth direction does not exist. You could no more end a marriage than you could decide to stop the sun. So when Jonas stood at that window and said he would go to the bishop, he was not asking for something difficult. He was asking for something that had no name. There was no procedure. There was no precedent. The bishop would not have known what to do with him. Let me take you back to the wedding itself, because you have to understand how the day arrived at that cold room. We were married on a Thursday in late November, after the harvest, the way all our weddings were. I had been awake since 4 in the morning. By noon the house and the barn were full, 300 souls, and the benches were hard, and the sermons went on for the better part of 4 hours. The bishop preached about Gelassenheit, about yielding, about a wife submitting herself and a husband leading the home in godliness. I sat there in my new blue dress, the dress I had sewn myself, and I thought about the man I was about to belong to, and the truth is, I barely knew him. That is the part nobody tells you. I had spoken to Jonas perhaps a dozen times. We had ridden home together in his buggy from the Sunday singings. We had sat in my parents' front room with my mother knitting in the corner. We had never once been alone, not truly, not for a single hour. I knew the shape of his hands and the sound of his voice and almost nothing else. And he knew nothing of me. The meal afterward was roast chicken and mashed potatoes and gravy thick as paste, and choufle pie so sweet it caught in your throat. The guests lingered the way guests do. My cheeks ached from smiling. The house smelled of coffee and wood smoke and 300 wet wool coats. And then, the way it always went quietly, without anyone seeming to notice, we went upstairs. The room was the one his uncle had given us, a wooden bed his cousins had built, a handmade quilt, a wash basin, cool water, no mirror, no lock on the door. I could still hear voices below us, a chair scraping, someone laughing low. I unpinned my prayer cap and set it on the nightstand, and my hands were shaking, and I told myself the shaking was only the cold. And that was when Jonas turned from the window and told me he did not want to be married to me. He was not cruel about it. I want you to understand that, because it matters to everything that came after. He did not raise his voice. He stood there in his good Sunday clothes, a grown man of 26, and his voice broke like a boy's. There was someone else, he said, a woman from a district 2 counties over. He had loved her for 3 years. Her father had forbidden it over a matter of money, an old debt between the families, and so Jonas had been steered toward me, the way a horse is steered, gently, with a hand he barely felt until the gate had already closed behind him. He had gone through the whole wedding, he said, all 4 hours of it, 300 people, his mother weeping with joy in the second row, because he did not know how to stop it. And now it was done. And he could not bear it. He said he would go to the bishop in the morning and confess everything and beg him to find some way to undo it, even if it meant the shunning, even if it meant leaving. I listened to all of it. I sat on the edge of that bed and I listened until he ran out of words. And then I said no. I want to be honest with you about what that no was, because for many years I did not understand it myself. It was not love. I did not love Jonas. How could I? I had known him for a handful of conversations. It was not pride either, though there was some of that. A girl does not like to be the thing a man wants undone. No. What rose up in me in that cold room was something I did not have a word for until I was a very old woman. It was refusal. Plain refusal. The refusal to be erased on the first night of my own life as a woman. I told him I would not let him go to the bishop. Not because the vows were holy, though I believed they were. Not because I feared the shunning, though I did. I told him no because I had stood up in front of 300 people and given my word, and a woman's word was the only thing in that whole world that belonged entirely to her. They could choose my husband. They could choose my dress and my district and the number of children God would send. But the word I had spoken, the yes I had given that morning, that was mine. And I would not let him take my no away from me, too. What happened over the next 11 Sundays? I cannot carry it in 20 minutes. There are things this recording cannot hold. The names, the counting, the drawer, the dress I kept for 27 years. 3 years ago, I wrote it all down. The book is called The Sundays. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. But I can tell you the shape of it. We did not share that bed as man and wife, not that night, not for a long time after. We lay on opposite edges of it like two boards, the way the young ones do when they are courting and afraid, except we were not afraid of touching. We were afraid of the morning. He did not go to the bishop. I held him to that. And in the holding, something began that neither of us had planned. Here is the thing nobody tells you about a marriage that begins in refusal. It has nowhere to go but honesty. We had no romance to protect, no sweetness to keep up appearances for. So we talked, in the dark, in Pennsylvania Dutch, the way I had once imagined a marriage might be, but had never believed it could. He told me about the woman 2 counties over, and I let him, and I did not weep, because his grief was not an insult to me. It was just his grief. And slowly, week by week, Sunday by Sunday, he began to ask me about myself, what I dreamed, what I feared, what I had wanted before the gate closed behind me, too. My friend Mary married the same autumn I did. Years later, kneading bread in her pantry where no one could overhear, she told me her husband had never once asked her a single question about her own heart in 40 years. Not one. She had borne him 9 children, and he did not know that she had wanted, as a girl, to teach school. She wept telling me, and I understood then that the cold room and the broken vow had given me, by some terrible accident, the one thing most women in my world were never given, a husband who knew he had wronged me and spent his life learning who I was as a way of asking forgiveness. I am not going to tell you it became a great love. That is not the truth, and I promised you the truth. It became something quieter, and I think rarer. It became respect. Jonas never went back to the woman 2 counties over. She married a man from her own district within the year, and Jonas and I built a life on the strangest foundation a marriage was ever built on, the night he tried to end it, and the night I would not let him. When I left the community at last, I was not young. My children were grown and gone, some of them into the world like me, some of them still inside. Jonas had passed 2 winters before, and the cost of leaving, even at my age, was immediate. The letters I sent came back unopened. My one surviving sister will not say my name. I learned in my old age what the young ones learn now, that the door does not open again once you have walked through it. But I sat with a counselor, an English woman, gentle, patient, in a small, bright office that smelled of nothing at all, and she gave me words I had carried my whole life without knowing their names: autonomy, consent. She told me that the no I said at 18 was not stubbornness and was not sin. It was a woman refusing to disappear, and she said something I have thought about every day since. She said that the smallest word can be the bravest thing a person ever does, and that I had done it before I even knew what bravery was. I grieve the girl in that cold room. I do. She was so young, and she was so alone, and she did not know that the rest of her life would hang on a single syllable spoken in lamplight to a man who did not want her. But I am also proud of her. She did not yet have the words, but she had the thing the words are only trying to describe. So if you have ever stood in a cold room while someone tried to undo you, a marriage, a family, a whole life arranged by other hands, and you found somewhere underneath the fear one small word that was entirely your own, then I am speaking to you. If you were taught that yielding was holiness and that a woman's wants did not count, I see you. Your no counts. It always did, even when they told you it did not. I was too young that night to understand love, but I was old enough, just barely, to understand that I belonged to myself. The Sundays what 20 minutes cannot hold. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. The morning is yours if you decide it is.